you for joining us. Here is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. We start our bulletin this afternoon from Libya. Around 5,000 migrants are being held in official detention centers in Libya, but they could represent just the tip of the iceberg, the International Organization for Migration IOM chief has said. Speaking in Geneva on Wednesday, Antonio Vitorino decried the violation of the rights of migrants in Libya as he urged to look for alternatives to the detention of people on the road to exile. In Libya, the UN agency IOM collaborates with the refugee agency UNHCR to provide assistance to migrants in official detention centers following the chaos induced by the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi and the fall of his regime in 2011. Libya became a preferred route. Thousands of migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East and South Asia. We go to Tanzania, and for the first time in Tanzania's history, the president has attended an International Women's Day event organized by the main opposition party, Chadema. President Samia Suluhu Hassan's presence was welcomed by Chadema chairman Freeman Mbowe, who said it was the fruit of meetings aimed at achieving reconciliation. Ms. Samia, who addressed thousands in the meeting, said that reconciliation was ongoing in Tanzania's politics and that some steps had been taken. Meanwhile, others were in progress, including the finding of a new constitution. In her address, the President Samia added it had been difficult to start the reconciliation process as some in her ruling party were not ready, and she is Tanzania's first female president, having taken over office following the death of John Magufuli in 2021. Mr. Magufuli was accused by the opposition of being authoritarian and cracking down on members of the opposition. We go to Mali, and an influential organization of religious leaders in Mali on Tuesday called on its followers to reject a new constitution being drawn up under the country's junta leadership, maintaining the principle of secularism. The proposal to change Mali's constitution aimed to enable the military-run West African nation to return to civilian rule. The new constitution is supposed to be put to a plebiscite, originally scheduled for March the 19th, but the junta has made no comment on the timetable amid widespread doubts about the date. The junta's declared goal is to hold elections in February 2024 that would lead to restoration of civilian rule in Mali. A constitutional draft by the junta leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, late last month stated an attachment to the Republican form and to the secularism of the state, but the Mali League of Imams and Scholars of Islamic Solidarity called Tuesday for the removal, pure and simple, of the word secularism and for it to be replaced by a multi-confessional state. It called on all patriotic Muslims to vote against the draft constitution in its current form. Mali is a majority Muslim country. Tunisia's president hosted Wednesday his counterpart from Guinea-Bissau. The visit to Tunis of the ECOWAS chairman came amid racist attacks targeting sub-Saharan migrants in North African nation. During a National Security Council meeting last week, President Kais Saied linked undocumented immigrants to violence and crimes from the Carthage Palace. He denied racism, insisting on his will to uphold the will of law. Rights groups have reported a spike in vigilante violence, including stabbings of black Africans, since the president's initial comments, while migrants say they have been thrown out of their dwellings in huge numbers and handed over to mob justice. And then the United Nations Security Council has extended sanctions and arms embargo against Sudan by a year. The 15-member council voted to renew the mandate of the panel of experts charged with monitoring and implementing the sanctions and embargo until the 12th of March next year. 13 countries voted in favor of the motion, with Russia and China abstaining. China's representative Dai Bing said the sanctions were outdated and should be lifted because things have improved on the ground. Russia's Dmitry Polyansky said the sanctions regime did not reflect the situation in Darfur and was preventing the Sudan government from state building and achieving socio-economic development. U.S. Representative John Kelly said he endorsed a continuation of monitoring and reporting. He added that progress on benchmarks anchored in the Juba peace deal signed in 2020 would move Sudan and its people towards the peace and prosperity they deserve. Sudan has been in economic and political turmoil since 2021, when General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan led junta overthrew and took power from the civilian-led transitional government. The coup derailed the transition to civilian rule following the ousting in 2019 of longtime leader Omar al-Bashir. And then we go closer to Sudan, and that is in South Sudan. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has sacked his foreign minister less than a week after dismissing the defense and interior ministers. No explanation was given for the dismissal of Mayik Ayin Deng, which was announced in a decree on the state television. The sacked minister is an ally of Mr. Kiir and previously served as the minister in the president's office. Last week's sackings have threatened to derail a peace deal with opposition leader, first Vice President Riek Machar. The opposition called for the reinstatement of Angelina Teny, whom Mr. Kiir dismissed as defense minister and handed the position to his party. Ms. Teny is also Mr. Machar's wife. The UN called for the parties to exercise restraint and engage in a collegial spirit in order to resolve such sensitive national issues. And in Mozambique, transport operators have announced that they will no longer cross into South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province because of growing insecurity on the road. Bus and taxi operators would stop at the Ponta do Ora border, and passengers would have to catch other means of transport to continue with their journey, often to Durban, the biggest city in KwaZulu-Natal. Gangs in the KZN have continuously stopped Mozambican registered private commercial vehicles, robbing passengers and torching vehicles. The most recent attack was on Saturday, with Mozambicans retaliating on Monday by torching a South African registered vehicle on their side of the border. The commercial vehicles carry both Mozambicans and South Africans. The road is busy, with Mozambicans often traveling from Maputo to Durban to buy goods to sell in shops and markets in Mozambique's capital. For their part, South Africans mostly come to Mozambique for holiday, and the beach in Ponta do Ora is popular with them. So the decision will not only negatively affect the business of transport company, but also other related sectors. Activists in Zimbabwe are warning of possible mayhem in this year's general election after discovering that redrawn electoral boundaries have located dozens of wards in Antarctica. The pressure group Team Pachedu found the other coordinates provided by the Electoral Commission pointed to spots in the middle of the Indian Ocean, as well as Zambia, Eswatini, and South Africa. The activists said the erroneous demarcation of the wards would result in candidates campaigning to the wrong audience and voters not knowing which constituency their home was located. There has been no word so far from the Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission. And the latest from the Democratic Republic of Congo: fighting is continuing between the army of the DRC and the M23 rebels in violation of Tuesday's ceasefire. Local media say there were clashes on several fronts in the eastern province of North Kivu. The rebels are reported to have seized a number of villages, including Karuba, which is around 30 kilometers from the regional capital, Goma. The army has accused the M23 of shelling UN peacekeepers and Burundian soldiers from an East African force recently deployed in an effort to stop the violence. The rebels say they want a peaceful resolution but have the right to defend themselves if attacked. And in Somalia, the lower house of Somalia's parliament on Wednesday approved a new anti-terrorism law that aims to provide a legal framework that will help government security agencies to better fight and eradicate terrorism in Somalia. Members of parliament approved the bill 131 to 3 votes with 7 abstentions on Wednesday after weeks of debate in what Somalia's intelligence director Mohamed Salad called a crucial law to make the Horn of Africa's country much safer. Critics of the law say they are concerned about the legislation's overly broad definition of who is a terrorist, warning that ratification of the law could grant government security agencies excessive and unchecked powers. Hassan Abdi Ismail is one of the lawmakers who expressed reservations about the legislation during the debates. Even the president and prime minister said they have good intentions, but it's not known with that what power that might hold. In the national law, it's not very clear, and such a law could affect the innocent civilians. Somali journalist turned lawmaker Mohammed Ibrahim Molimu, a 5-time survivor of Al-Shabaab terror attacks, said the new bill should not give government agencies easy arrest on suspects without court orders. That is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. I think there's also some update on from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I've just received this news just a few minutes ago, and a new attack on the eastern DRC on Wednesday night killed more than 40 people. According to local authorities, the attack was attributed to the ADF rebels who are affiliated with the Islamic State group. And the ADF are originally from Uganda, rebels with a Muslim majority who have been active since the mid-1990s in the eastern DRC, and they are accused of massacring thousands of civilians. In 2021, attacks to Ugandan soil were also attributed to them, and a joint military operation between the Congolese and Ugandan armies was launched to hunt them down in North Kivu and the neighboring Ituri province. So that is the latest news indeed from across the continent of Africa. So one of the key news stories that I perhaps just touch on very quickly and then you'll just be done is President Samia Hassan Suluhu of Tanzania, and the fact that for the first time a sitting government, I think not just in Tanzania but of any country that we know that has a democracy, and even for those who have a very dynamic democracy and mature democracy, it is the first time I've heard a sitting president attending a rally organized by the opposition, and she goes there respecting the organizers of that rally, which is the opposition party. Even in her capacity as the head of state, she attended that event. She said what she said in respect to those who had organized that event, and that was that. I think President Suluhu, and maybe we just need more women presidents in this world. Perhaps the world would be a better place. I don't know. But this is quite commendable that she was able to do this, because when you remember what the trajectory Tanzania was taking when President Pombe Magufuli was the president, Tanzania was experiencing a departure from what the rest of us had known Tanzania to be, and its politics had for a long time been calm and all that. But when President Pombe Magufuli came to power, you could see just a different aspect of Tanzania's politics. We were introduced to a different type of politics in Tanzania that we were not very familiar with, and with that we started seeing a very hardened opposition who had to push back at some of the policies and measures that the government had put in place, and that set Tanzania to almost be a conflict, to confrontational politics, as we've seen in other African countries, something that had never been experienced before or seen as far as the Tanzania politics is concerned. So when President Suluhu Hassan came into office, after the death of the former president, Tanzania was on a completely different trajectory, as I have said there, and President Samia has since presided over a raft of reforms that we've seen that have changed the direction of the country, which the country was taking from her predecessor, John Pombe Magufuli, who died in office in March 2021. So she's been in office about 2 years now, and I think some of the decisions she's made has really transformed Tanzania. And you can see not just from the head of state perspective, but even from the human perspective and maybe the woman perspective. I don't want to bring the gender card here, but you can see she's a person who genuinely wants to see Tanzanians live cohesively together, regardless of whatever their political affiliation is. And I think from what she is showing through her acts and through the decisions that she's been able to make is that in Tanzania, we can hold different views and have different persuasions as far as our politics is concerned, but at the end of the day, we are still Tanzanians, and that politics or any other difference should not be something that now divides us as a country. So I think that is what she is very keen in doing, because she must have seen what else is happening here in the continent, and if some of these things are not really checked early enough, some of these divisions, be it under religious divide or political divide or whichever kind of divide, if these things are not checked properly and tempered with in good time, in a way that they're not allowed to go so deep to the extent that they can divide a country, that they can become very detrimental to a country. So I think she understands the importance of practicing politics, diverse politics, but at the same time, not forgetting who we are as a people, that is Tanzanians. We can disagree at the end of the day. We can have different views on whatever issue of the day that they are struggling with in Tanzania, but in the heart of it all, they are all Tanzanians, and they have a country to preserve, and still that peace and cohesion and that socialist agenda that therefore the first president left them with, that is something that they have to. The Ujamaa is something that is still has to be maintained and has to be protected. So that is the message that I'm getting from President Samia Suluhu, and she was sworn in as Tanzania's first female president on March 19th. So I think she will be celebrating her 3 years in office very soon, when the nation was still mourning the death of Magufuli, who was nicknamed the bulldozer for his uncompromising leadership style. Magufuli and Samia, who was then vice president, were re-elected in October 2020 general election, which was fiercely disputed by the main opposition party, Chadema. And I think she was just sitting there as the vice president, and a lot of people didn't know her. I didn't even know the name of Tanzania's vice president until President Magufuli died. Nobody knew her name. She was there serving, honoring her boss, and being diligent with her work. So when her boss died, she took over, and I think when she was honoring and working under former President Magufuli, as much as you can see from the decisions she's making, we can tell there's a probability she was not in agreement with maybe a lot of decisions that were being made by that regime at that time that she was still serving in. But out of respect for her boss, and maybe something a lot of our leaders around this continent might want to learn, we never heard her voice or give an alternative opinion, that was contrary to the government's position while President Magufuli was the president. But now you can tell there are a lot of things that probably President Magufuli at that time was doing that she was not in complete agreement with, and that can be seen in the manner in which she's able to make the decisions that she's making and the policies that she's changing and some of the things that she's reversing that President Magufuli had put in place, and one of them being the banning of political rallies, any kind of political rallies by the opposition. The other one was the gagging of the media. We saw international media at some point were even chased out of Tanzania, and we've seen her slowly reversing some of these decisions, because she understands, as much as Tanzania has its own identity as a country, and they do have that very strong identity as a country, but at the same time Tanzania cannot exist in isolation. And for you to function and exist well in this international system, there are some things that you have to adjust, not completely lose yourself as a people and as a country, but there's some things you have to adjust and see that your country also moves forward as far as some of the developments and some of the things that the rest of the world are doing, and the things, and especially when it comes to certain freedoms like freedom of speech, freedom of the media, freedom of engagement, allowing a flourishing space for multi-party democracy. These are things that more countries are increasingly embracing in advance of the introduction of multi-party democracy in Africa. We've seen a lot of countries have this, and democracy is kind of sort of growing, because I think it's interesting how we choose to apply or look at democracy, I think, in the different countries, depending on the interests of the government in power at that time. So democracy in Africa is very subjective. It's not a one yardstick like we see in the West. You can easily know that this side of party, or these are the party, these are their beliefs, these are their values. So if a leader from this party comes to power, then you know the kind of agenda they'll push, the stance they will take, and the issues they will advocate for, and things like that. So but in Africa it's neither here nor there. So it's all that. But President Magufuli has understood, Samia has understood the importance of evolving and perhaps catching up, and she realized, as much as it is important to maintain certain things, but also it is important for Tanzania to move. You saw once she came to power, it was at the heart of COVID-19, and there are claims that perhaps the late president died from COVID-19, and we know the kind of stance he had taken on COVID-19. He didn't care. He did not. Well, the rest of the world were walking around with masks and practicing social distancing and all these lockdowns. President Magufuli said, no, we're not going to do that. We don't believe in that. We'll just take these traditional medicines or whatever that is, but we will live our lives as normal. And there were reports that senior government officials during that time died, and a lot of people died, but it was never being announced, because there's even a law that was passed during that time that barred media houses talking about COVID-19. So immediately she came to power, we could see her walking around and wearing her mask. So you can see she immediately took a different turn from the former president. And after she was sworn in, President Samia declared 14 days of national mourning. She had to be sworn in immediately after President Magufuli died, because the country needed a leader at that time. Nature abhors a vacuum. Leadership also abhors vacuum. So there had to be a president quickly. And under the constitution of Tanzania, when the president dies, the vice president comes to power. And remember, they had just won an election, I think is it 2 months or 3 months just earlier. So President Magufuli was still fresh in his second term. Tanzania, you go for 2 terms each 5 years. So President Magufuli had just been re-elected for his second term. So essentially, President Samia gets to serve the whole of that term, and then of course she has announced that she will be heading for a re-election in 2015. And there's something else also that the opposition has been pushing for, and that is for the review of the Tanzania's constitution. There are certain aspects of that constitution that might not be alive to the realities and the way things exist today in Tanzania. Those sanctions might have been effective a couple of 30 years ago, 20 years ago, but as things stand today, it appears the constitution is not effectively addressing certain things, especially around elections. You know, Tanzania, once the Electoral Commission has announced the presidential winner, that's it. There's no, whether you feel the elections was not done in a way that was free and fair, there is no redress. As long as the Electoral Commission announces the results and declares the winner, that's the end of it all. And so there has been some agitation from the opposition, especially that among other laws that they would want to be reviewed. And Samia Hassan has, President Suluhu has said that she will be looking into that, but after the elections that I think are scheduled to take place in 2025. And when she was in that meeting yesterday that was organized by the opposition, she said, "This is the time to stand together and be united. It is time to bury our differences, promote love among us, and look into the future with confidence." Now, that sounds like a leader I'd like to be my leader. I tell you. Now, this isn't the time to start pointing accusing fingers at one another. We should hold hands and move forward in building a Tanzania that President Magufuli endeavored to build, she added. And you know, you can see she understands the importance and her position as the uniting, the symbol of unity of the country, because usually that is what the president is. And that's why you would see after elections and, you know, during the elections, the rhetorics are usually very over the place. But once you've been elected and you have been, you are the president now, then what people would expect of this person is for you now to be presidential, and that's why you'll hear others being criticized. You know, that person is not being very presidential, and I think former president of the US used to receive a lot of that. He forgot his role as the head of state, and which is the symbol of unity for the country. So despite who voted for you, which side supported you, or what it is that you stand for, but at the end of the day, when you are the president, then you have a responsibility of uniting everybody, and you should be the president that is seen to be working for everybody. So I think she recognizes her role and the place that she has, the privileged place that the Constitution gives her, as far as uniting this country is concerned. But as much as she wants to say, you know, we'll be moving forward in building a new Tanzania that President Magufuli endeavored to build, but I think outside of the vision that perhaps President Magufuli had, she's coming in with her own style. I think there are even some developmental partners that President Magufuli had severe terms with, but we've seen them come back in Tanzania, and now the country is having a working diplomatic relations with them. So, however, 2 years down the road, Tanzania has made a clean break from Magufuli's mostly hardline policies in various spheres. So, as much as she wants us to know that she's just trying to live up to the dream of former President Magufuli, but clearly she has departed. She has departed, and her way of doing things seems to be working well for Tanzanians. Her way of doing, she had to travel all the way to abroad where the opposition leaders were and had conversations with them and told them it's okay. You can come home. You are our son. You are a son of Tanzania. Come back home. The government will offer you protection, and everything that you lost, or all your things that were destroyed, all your property, the government will repatriate back, and you'll have reparations. And we've seen that happen. Some boys back and other leaders are also back. And when you see the reception they get from the airport, and the government has allowed that to happen. So that is quite a departure from what Magufuli was doing. And the first major test President Samia faced was the raging COVID-19 pandemic, and whom President Magufuli had dismissed as a hoax. But you saw how she was able to handle that, and she put these COVID-19 protocols in place that Magufuli was not keen on on doing, and of course reaching out to the opposition and reforming the justice system. She's also working on that, and President Suluhu is currently focusing on reforming the justice system and has already appointed a team to review the institutions responsible for justice. The team will investigate, among other things, the performance of the Prevention and Combating of Corruption Bureau, Police Force, Judiciary, Drug Control and Enforcement Agency, as well as Tanzania's Prison Service. These are some of the state institutions that are frequently at the receiving end of criticism and complaints from the public. So you can see these are a great reform. So if she has a team that is backing her, but something that she said, well, she was in that meeting yesterday that had been I think it was International Women's Day yesterday. So this is an event that was organized by the main opposition party for the Women's Day that President Suluhu decided to attend. Look at that humility. I mean, she's a woman. She would have rented or sort of ran an event, her own event in a stadium, and she has a lot of support. A lot of people would have come. But look at how she leads with humility. Sometimes you don't have to flex. You don't have to use the military. You don't have to use might. And by her taking the stance that she is taking, she is endearing herself to the people. And if this woman was to run again, she will win these elections. And if, of course, I don't know if the issue of her running again after 2025 will arise, that will be a problem. She will not start arguing like Alpha Conde. I served from Pombe Magufuli's time, so my mandate starts in 2025, and then now I'll have to go for another re-election. That might be a problem. Or if they decide to do the constitutional reforms, and then the next elections, she might decide, because now the constitution will be in effect in the next elections, that's when it will start working, then this is a fresh mandate, so whatever had served before does not count. That is how a lot of our leaders in this continent operate. We saw it in Burkina Faso, and we saw it in Guinea, and that brought a problem to Alpha Conde, so it's not a new phenomenon. But nevertheless, the fact that she decided not to have her own event as the head of state in this very important day, celebrating women, and she's a woman, and instead humbling herself and attending and gracing a function that had been organized by the opposition. This is a show for humility and servant leadership to some extent, if you might say that we don't get to see often here in the continent. A lot of our leaders just have the big man syndrome. If it's not me, then who? If I don't do it, then it can't be done. If it's not me organizing that, then I can't attend, and things like that. So this is what we need moving forward, and a lot of this male leaders, sorry to say, might want to borrow a leaf from such a person. We see women not having problem even to step aside when they feel they can't offer their best to the country. New Zealand president, there's a president in Ireland, and in other places, the first vice, minister in these places. So we've seen it. When Angela Merkel had enough of leading Germany, she said, okay, now it's time for me to step aside, and she stepped aside. And these are women who are leading well, and if they even had decided to run again, they would have been allowed that opportunity, but they know when to step aside, which is something we don't see a lot with our male leaders. So maybe this is something that they should look at and see. When you have been allowed to hold certain positions, it is a privilege that the people have given you. So you shouldn't take it for granted, and you should show some level of humility and servant leadership so that you're able to serve the people. Unfortunately, that usually is not what we see. So yesterday, while she was addressing that event, President Samia added that it had been difficult to start the reconciliation process as some people in her ruling party were not ready. there are some old guards there in CCM party who are not ready to embrace change, and who perhaps were Magufuli loyalists and loved the way Magufuli was doing the things, was running the party and the country, and they are not willing to accept this new change that Samia Suluhu seems to be introducing to the country. So I love that she is honest with that, and so, but nevertheless, she's still pushing forward and understanding the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is to leave perhaps Tanzania better than she found it, something that some of our leaders would really benefit if they would just pay attention and maybe copy a bit of that kind of a leadership style, hopefully. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'll see you here again tomorrow, God willing. My name is Miriam Gut. Bye-bye for now.
Rivers do not drink their own water. Trees do not eat their own fruit. The sun does not shine on itself, and flowers do not spread their fragrance for themselves. Living for others is a rule of nature. We are all born to help each other. No matter how difficult it is, life is good when you are happy, but much better when others are happy because of you.